Welcome to the CEO Next Door podcast, episode 1. We're kicking off this episode by sticking in house and telling this founder story of yours truly. I'm Mike Mayer. I run Main Event Digital, a B2B digital marketing agency out of the Chicagoland area. Joining me today is my co-host and VP of Growth at Main Event, Donovan Morrison. How's it going, Donovan?
It's going pretty well, Mike. I'm excited to be doing this with you, finally kicking things off life-wise in the process of a cross-country move. So trying to figure out those logistics with visiting family in New York and Boston and Minneapolis surrounding the holidays. It's a lot, but all is well. And excited to finally be chatting with you today. And speaking of that, I'm really excited to learn more about you. We've been working together now for about 6 months, and I think I know the high level Mike Mayer, but I want to get to know who is the real Mike Mayer.
It might scare you, but we'll start talking through it.
Sounds good.
So today I'm going to paint a picture of what made me who I am and how I got here. It's going to be a background of my history of starting and running businesses with some anecdotes about what made me who I am today. So let's get right to it. So my story starts in the mid-70s in suburban Northwest Indiana at a mere 6 months old. My mother marries at the ripe old age of 21 to a brilliant perfectionist med school dropout who later becomes a pharmacist. As far as him dropping out of med school, I recently learned from his best friend at the time, who I just met, more to come on that crazy story in a minute, that he was a straight A student all the way through college and into med school. He struggled to maintain straight A's in med school, but was still doing a fine job. But the lack of perfection weighed on him and led to his abandonment of the program. So he changed career tracks, switched to pharmacy school, and passed with flying colors. Let's call that accomplishment the best and worst thing that happened to my father. He met the love of his life, married my mother, they had me, and 6 months later, he's gone. He took his own life, overdosing on the very meds that he distributes to help others. He suffered from mental illness, and in the mid-70s, education on depression was not as prevalent as it is today. The pain and suffering that he endured was more than he could handle. He left my mother and me without a trace, checked into a hotel in the northern suburbs of Chicago, and took his own life. He didn't leave a note, which leads me to believe that maybe his goal was not suicide. Who knows? How can someone leave a 6-month-old baby and the love of his life without leaving a note? My only explanation is that he wasn't in his right mind and was truly suffering. I tell you this story because it obviously had a major impact on my upbringing and who I am today. But before I move on, I've got to tell you the craziest story of meeting his best friend. So after my father's gone, my mother maintains a close relationship with his family, but everyone in the family is so fucking traumatized by his death, which I understand. Barely a word about him is mentioned to me for most of my upbringing. So as an adult, I'm often trying to extract stories about him buried deep in the brains of my aunts and uncles and mom. But so much time has passed that my attempts are pretty fruitless. To this day, I know almost nothing about this man. I had also never met anyone that knew him, anyone else other than my family, until 2 years ago. My mom happened to find herself online late one night trying to connect with old friends. She happened to remember the name of my father's best friend and Googled him. She found him on Facebook and does some more digging to find out where he lives nowadays. This is the crazy part. He lives directly across the street from me. No joke. It's not like we live in a high-rise condo buildings in Manhattan where you could potentially know 30 people across the street. We live on a very quiet street in idyllic Highland Park, Illinois. So she calls me to share the news, and I'm blown away. So it took me a couple days, but I worked up the courage to go across the street. Granted, we've met before, but our shared history is completely unknown to my father's old best friend, Jake. Before this discovery, I don't think we exchanged more than 20 words with our across the street neighbor. I do recall Linda knocking on the door 10 years ago to welcome us to the neighborhood when we moved in, and that was pretty much the extent of our relationship. My neighborhood is quiet, to say the least. When we moved onto the block, we were the youngest family and the only family with young children. So I worked up the courage and walked across the street with Amy, my wife. I rang the doorbell and I introduced us as, "Hi, Mike and Amy from across the street," because I doubt that Jake and Linda even remembered our names at this point. I asked Jake if he knew Murray Sherman, my father. He said yes, and why? I told him that he was my father, and Jake's face turned white as a ghost. He got all choked up. Jake and Linda, they were high school sweethearts, and they both knew my father really well. They were blown away. That's one of the craziest coincidences that I've ever encountered. My deceased father's best friend lives across the street from me, and it takes me 10 years to make that connection. You just never know what kind of shared past you have with the people in your life.
Wow, Mike, that's a lot to process. I can't fathom this man's father figure who you've heard so much about, I'm sure, growing up, having this close tie, seemingly coming out of nowhere across the street from you. That's truly unbelievable. And I'm sure one of the most surreal moments that you've ever experienced. I mean, the old adage, everyone says it's a small world and the 6 degrees of separation, but that truly comes to light in situations like these.
It was crazy. Yeah,
I'm sure.
Unbelievable. You know, our social networks do a great job of connecting our current lives to the people around us. But how great would it be to have a social network to share your past? I guess I'm thinking of a combo of like an ancestry.com, classmates.com, and Facebook, with a component that inquires, documents, and connects you with others based on people, places, and activities from the past. For example, I was a freshman in college almost 30 years ago, which is nuts, and have very little recollection of who was on my floor in the dorm, other than a few of my neighbors. It would be great for me to identify on the app that I was on the first floor of Teeter Boys in my freshman year, which was 1990. What was it? 97? No, 93.
It's a while ago. It's tough to remember those times.
That's when I started college. Yeah. And it would be cool to be able to identify that on an app and see other people that were on that floor at the same time. Or I could identify that I spent the summer of 1985 at an overnight camp in Wisconsin called Camp Shy, and could see the other people that were there with me. I'd venture to guess that I know people in my current life that were at camp with me and shared some sort of history with me there. So if you love this idea of an app to connect our past, please go out and build the app. Let me know when you do. I'd be happy to be a beta tester. All right. So back to my childhood. So my mother remarried when I was 3 to a criminal defense attorney who also worked as a public defender in the court system. He adopted me and they had 2 more kids, my half brothers. Due to my age when all of this went down, my stepdad seemed to be the real deal, and I never thought of my brothers as half brothers. We lived a quiet, privileged, middle-class life in Indiana suburbia. I spent my time riding my bike, playing wiffle ball, shooting hoops, and hanging out with the many kids living nearby. Life was good. And at the age of 8, my entrepreneurial journey truly began. Two big things happened this year. I started my first retail business, and my dad bought us one of the first personal computers on the market. Let's start with my first retail business. I remember flipping through a Boys Life magazine and seeing an ad for a Kool-Aid stand in the classifieds. A light bulb went off in my head. I thought the stand was cool, but wasn't all that necessary to start a Kool-Aid stand, which is basically the same thing as a lemonade stand, but with a different sugary flavored drink. So there I went to the grocery store with my mom to buy 10-cent packages of Kool-Aid, plastic cups, and a boatload of sugar. I grabbed some poster board for my sign, and I was off to the races. As soon as I got home, I created my signage, mixed up a few pictures, and set up a table at the end of my driveway. It was a hot summer day, and my stand was officially open for business. Within a couple of hours, I'd easily sold 20 cups at 25 cents a piece. That $5 of profit, my mom paid for the supplies, was the first time I earned any money on my own. In today's terms, that $5 is equivalent to $14. Oh, it was a game changer.
Wow, who would have thought little Mike and his innovative spirit making waves from a young age? Did you go out and purchase or create like the Kool-Aid Man costume to really draw in the droves?
No, I was not out there in costume. No uniforms, just me and this little table and my sign and pictures of Kool-Aid, and that's all it took.
Got it. Well, maybe we can dress up in as the Kool-Aid Men when we relaunch the booth for our 2022 edition.
I would love to do that. That'd be fun. So my first lesson learned was when you have an idea, get out there and test it. Don't sit around writing a 30-page business plan. Start operating on as small of a scale as possible to get a glimpse if your business has legs. So to coincide with me starting my first entrepreneurial venture, my dad bought one of the first IBM personal computers with an Intel 8088 processor. This machine couldn't have been more foreign to me and was the coolest thing I had ever seen. We didn't yet have computers at school, but within a year or two, the school system added a single Apple IIe to each classroom. This machine at my house had no hard drive, but instead had dual 5.25-inch floppies that could store about 320 kilobytes of data, double-sided. To put this into perspective, a 1-minute MP3 is about 1 megabyte, or 3 times the capacity of the floppy. This machine was instrumental in putting me on the path towards tech, although you'll soon learn that I veered off this path for many years. I did my first programming on this machine. The first code I wrote was a very crude animation of a sun rising accompanied by America the Beautiful. I recall programming each note and pauses for the music, one at a time. It was extremely tedious. Looking back, I'm surprised my dad made this purchase. He was an attorney, and as much as he was fairly tech savvy, especially during this day and age, always having the latest film cameras, video cameras, VCRs, and so on, I don't know what possessed him to invest in this machine. Besides his home and his cars, this was the most expensive thing he had ever purchased. Back in the day, these machines started at $1,600, which is equivalent to like $5,500 today.
Yeah, that's nuts. I think to me, it's incredible how environmental factors can have such an impact on the course of your life. If your father, stepfather had not purchased this and you had not begun working on it at a young age, probably would have ended up in a completely different field. And I think what's really encouraging to me is that although obviously you experienced this early trauma with your father that I cannot begin to fathom, it sounds like your family banded together and became a support system. And I'm sure that
Oh,
helped everyone really excel in their lives moving forward.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, it brought everyone together, and we, as much as we put that history behind us, we knew what was important in life, and
Yeah.
so family became very important. And it was the kind of a home life where dinner was on the table at 5 p.m. every night, and we sat down and had a family meal. And weekends were spent, doing going apple picking, or going on road trips. So it was a great upbringing. I can't complain. I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, I think that's something that is difficult to fully appreciate and comprehend at the time when you're growing up. But when you reflect on especially those formative years when you're in grade school and middle school, a lot of those routines that your parents and family have in place are so impactful later in life and truly are worthwhile.
Totally. So let's fast forward a few years. I'm continuing to hustle and find ways to earn. I didn't have anything that I needed or I wanted to buy, but I just love the idea of having my own business, and especially my own bank account. I sold whatever I could get my hands on. I went garage sale hopping in the neighborhood and picked up random toys and sports equipment that I could resell to my friends. I even resold Halloween candy for weeks after Halloween. All of these sales were taking place on the card table at the end of my driveway. It was a pop-up store, which physically had to move to make way for my parents pulling in and out of the garage. And then I find myself in middle school, and I meet a friend who continues to be a friend to this day, 35 years later. He now lives in Kansas, but I actually just reconnected with him a few weeks ago after not seeing him for like 6 years. We saw Mike Birbiglia's live stand-up act at the Chicago Theater. Epic show. Highly recommend Mike Birbiglia. Anyway, this friend introduced me to the world of baseball cards, and what an introduction it was. We started a business together called J&M Sports Cards, Jason and Mike Sports Cards. Our plan was to buy cases of wax packs, open them, build sets, and pull out the individual stars to sell on their own. At the ripe old age of 12, we were booking tables at sports card shows around the area, which at this time, there were many. We paid for the table and we set up our wares for sale.
So I'm curious, what was your favorite card that you came across during your time in the lucrative baseball card
Yeah.
industry?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to that industry. It was all the fever at that time.
Now it's
Um,
NFTs, right?
yeah, exactly. I guess I'm old school. Um, yeah, I think my one of my favorite cards that I had picked up was a 69 tops Reggie Jackson rookie card.
Wow.
It was rare. It wasn't in mint condition. It was in good condition. It's probably worth at that time, $400 or $500. And now 35 years later, it's probably worth about the same or maybe less. Like I've accumulated so many cards over the years, and I've stopped collecting, 30 years ago. But I hung on to a lot, and it was one of the worst investments after all, because they never appreciated in value. I should have sold them all back in the 90s, but you live and you learn.
Yep.
So so yeah, we were innovative. We tried a whole slew of marketing techniques to increase our revenue at these shows. We built out bundles, grab bags, mystery packs. Yeah, we even added a dice game. All right, so how that dice game worked. We created this large board. Basically, it was poster board, and on there we created all of these squares numbered 6 through 36. Each number was next to a card, a pack, a box, a bundle, cash, or other items that the customer could win. We understood the odds and placed the very valuable prizes at the hard to reach numbers. And we sold rolls of our dice game for $1. We had people lining up to play this game. It was the hottest thing at these shows. We were gamifying before gamification was a thing, and it worked like a charm.
Yes. Casting lots from a young age. I'm surprised you two didn't end up in either the casino or even better, carnival industry. I'm sure you could have made a killing.
That might have been a good choice. No,
maybe that's an alternate career path or a nice retirement, something to do during retirement.
There you go. Yeah, maybe just play in casinos. Nothing to do with carnivals.
That's a good call.
Yeah, but we learned a few lessons from this little dice game. 1, people like playing games. 2, once we drew a few people in and a line started to build, it attracted even more people. People followed the crowd and assumed that others knew something they didn't. So yeah, that was a fun little game. The sports card business remained a side hustle as we moved into high school and started driving ourselves to the card shows. Jason's still an avid collector, dealer today, and has hundreds of thousands of cards, taking up his entire basement. And he continues to be passionate about it. But I threw in the towel during high school after a move to a different home, city, and school district. I literally moved across the street to a new school district. But I still have tens of thousands of cards that are illiquid and taking up space in my home. I would love an easy avenue to sell these cards. If I wanted to start selling my collection, I would need to select individual cards, put them in hard cases, send them out in the mail to a professional grader. I would need to pay for each card's grading, then get them sent back to me. Then go and list the card on a marketplace like eBay. I mean, that's a full-time job. I'm not interested in starting that. So there's a business idea, number 2 business idea for you listeners. Find an easy way for people to liquidate valuable sports cards. I'd be happy to give up margin to have someone else sell them for me, but I want nothing to do with them.
He's dead serious. Everyone who's listening, please reach out to him. Seriously, Mike's wife would be forever grateful to finally get rid of the cards. So please reach out.
One of the worst parts is over the years, I've moved, I don't know, probably 20 times. And I would never trust the cards to the movers. So it was just me moving from one into my car and into the next place. Like what a pain.
Having moved 2 days ago, I can sympathize with that. I can't sympathize. I can empathize with that plight of the heavy boxes.
So anyway, at the new school, I connected with a new group of friends. One of those friends introduced me to the world of bulletin board systems. I'm assuming most of our listeners here don't have the faintest what a bulletin board system or BBS is. It's basically a website. It was like a website before the World Wide Web was invented. This is during the same time that AOL, Prodigy, and CompuServe were in their heyday. Many of you may remember the CDs that AOL distributed pretty much everywhere. I remember getting them in the mail, in the grocery store, at Blockbuster, and can visualize them literally littering the streets. AOL had sent out over 1 billion of these CDs. I mean, that's insane. Anyway, typical BBSs were similar to the bulletin board that you're imagining in the real world. It was a place for people to post messages and communicate on various topics asynchronously. Additionally, these systems provided a mechanism to exchange software, typically pirated, and also had limited live chat capabilities, mostly with the system operator or sysop of the BBS. The user interface was text-based and nothing like a modern website that you frequent every day. I became obsessed with BBSs and quickly started my own called The Underground, as did my buddy Redman, also known as John, who started Rock Bottom. People access the underground by dialing out on their modems. It started with the 2400 baud modems and connecting to my second phone line. My parents had no idea why we needed a second phone line, nor why people were calling our house 24/7, but they were kind enough to pay for it. I guess they saw the time spent on the computer as constructive and a good use of time, if they only knew what was going on, on that computer. But if the IBM personal computer incited my enthusiasm for technology, my exposure to BBSs really focused my interest in networked computing.
Yeah, that's all news to me. Had no clue BBSs existed. I'm curious, what types of messages, what did you exchange on the underground?
Oh my gosh. I honestly, I have no recollection. It's so long ago. I don't remember the messages as much as the piracy, which hopefully there's a statute of limitations, but that was one of the main reasons I had the board. And, I would have a whole directory of files that people could come and grab. And in order to grab those, they would have to upload. So I would come back to my computer and I would have new software that was illegal. So
wow.
let's leave it at that.
That's fair.
I've incriminated myself already.
No, you're just fine, Mike. Yeah, I think my timing more coincided with my good friend Tom on MySpace and AIM, the instant messaging. I was infamous Mr. Cool 7778. So
that's awesome. I love that you remember it.
Oh yeah,
I remember my AIM name too. It was not as cool as yours. It was just M. Mayer 1975. Nah.
That's
wasn't creative.
Yeah, but that's much more professional.
It's professional.
Better to look back on than others.
It came in handy, as you'll soon hear in my story. So then on to college. I pick a major when I register for my classes at Indiana University, political science, which is completely out of left field. But at this time in my life, I kind of like the idea of holding public office and following in my father's footsteps as an attorney. I stick with it for the 4 years of college, but have an awakening after 3. The summer before my senior year, I secured a coveted job as an intern working for a congressman on Capitol Hill. My job was to give private tours of the Capitol to special guests from our district and to do some other miscellaneous tasks. I get to DC, and for the first 2 days of my internship, the current intern takes me through the 2-hour Capitol tour twice to train me. He has no written materials and encourages me to memorize the tour. Day 3 comes around and he's gone, and I'm up to give my first tour. I am totally fucked. I've memorized maybe 20% of the tour. So I decided to do my best and just wing it.
That had to be wildly stressful. How did you do? Were there any random facts that you remembered from the 2 tours that stood out that you could pull out for the tourists?
I remember a lot of the odd, like very specific, irrelevant facts, like Bob Bennett's candy desk. So Bob's desk in the Senate had a single large drawer filled to the brim with an assortment of candy that all the senators knew about and would casually grab candy as needed in the middle of session or in between. Apparently, this candy desk is a tradition in the Senate. It's been like that since 1968. And it's currently manned by Senator Pat Toomey. So yeah, as the summer goes on, I learn more about the Capitol and I create my own tour. My guests enjoy it, as do I. During my time working for the congressman, I began to realize how crooked our government was. Gifts are arriving in the congressman's office daily, and they're not from his family and friends. Some of these gifts are turned away, but many aren't. I leave my tenure feeling disappointed with my career choice, and I know I need to change paths and go back to my true passions: technology, marketing, and entrepreneurship. So when I get back to school, I stack all of my classes around these passions and start truly enjoying college courses for the first time. So I graduated college during the dot-com boom. I had little formal training in technology, but was determined to get a job as a web developer. Being that developers were in extremely high demand, I was able to find a job at a CPG marketing research company called Information Resources. And I got that job in no time. They were a competitor to AC Nielsen, which is more of a household name. So I attempted to learn VB, Visual Basic, JavaScript, and HTML on the job. But honestly, I struggled. So after 8 months, I decided to go back to school for a master's focused on tech. So when I got back to IU, I immediately started what I considered my third business, a computer consulting company called InfoSolve Consulting. I had some pretty decent tech skills at the time, but not just yet as a programmer. My consulting company offered software training and hardware setup services. I hung a flyer on the library bulletin board, the physical one, and picked up a couple of clients within a week. I was able to offer a service that at the time people needed, and the business sustained me while I was in school.
So on paper, that sounds great. But in reality, were you just the guy telling everyone, okay, unplug your device, wait 20 seconds, plug it back in, and you'll be good to go?
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Okay.
And charging for that time and doing that in person and probably not telling them, just doing that myself and reinstalling their Windows and, installing their printers, just simple stuff that is just really easy to do nowadays.
Hey, if you're providing a service that people need and helping them out, it's all that matters.
Exactly. So I ran that business through my years in grad school, and I was actually featured with a full page article on the front page of the Indiana Daily Student with a picture of me tilted back in my chair with my feet up on my desk. I'm not sure what message I was trying to convey. Maybe that of a big shot, but I definitely exuded an air of confidence.
A true businessman from a young age.
Yeah. So during my first year of grad school, I got an unsolicited message via AOL Instant Messenger from a freshman that had just moved to Indiana from New Jersey and was looking to meet people. So as we chatted online, we were both in shock with how much we had in common. After 2 hours of typing, I asked her if I could call her. Landline, of course. This is before cell phones. And that one phone call turned into many as we talked on the phone every day for hours for the next 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, I asked this stranger to go on a blind date. I picked her up at her dorm. Granted, I'm 23 at the time, so this is a bit odd. She brings me up to her floor and introduced me to a bunch of her friends, like the entire floor, which I later find out was a precautionary measure so that her friends could identify me if she went missing. So as soon as we met, she told me she wasn't feeling well and that she had a fever. And I felt her head and she did have a fever. I'm like, we can reschedule this. No big deal, but she didn't want to. So I took this very attractive 18-year-old to the fanciest of fancies, the Applebee's. She was too sick to eat, but that didn't stop me. After dinner, we dropped by Blockbuster to pick up a movie and went back to my apartment. There wasn't much going on at this time. We sat on the couch watching a terrible John Travolta movie. And after a while, I picked up her hand to hold it. We both felt sparks and it was a done deal. So this girl, obviously, she became my wife. And Amy and I have been together for 23 years now. Time flies. So you're probably wondering how our parents felt about our relationship. Can you imagine your 18-year-old daughter leaving the nest for the first time, moving 700 miles, and within 2 months, falling in love with the man she wants to marry, let alone with a guy 5 years her senior? I have a teenage daughter myself, and I cannot imagine this insane scenario. And I hope to God I never have to encounter it. Obviously, my in laws gave me a hard time at first, especially my father in law, but they came around eventually. They may have had some leniency with me as they actually got engaged on their first date.
Mike, your story is pretty crazy, but engaged on the first date, you have to tell me more. I'm
Well,
incredibly curious.
well, they were set up on a blind date, and by the end of their first date, my father-in-law tells my soon-to-be mother-in-law that he's going to marry her. And then 9 days later, he actually proposed. And then, like one day later, they were out in Boston at the time. They traveled to Indiana to meet his family. He's also from Indiana.
Wow.
So they were married 38 years before, unfortunately, his untimely passing about 5 years ago.
But talk about love at first sight. Maybe it's not cliche.
I guess not. I mean, it worked. It worked for two of us or four of us, and they were the happiest married couple that I've ever met.
Wow.
They were wonderful. So yeah, as grad school was winding down, found myself looking for a full-time job. The year was 2000, and believe it or not, I applied to jobs by sending applications and my resume to companies via a fax. I had a fax machine, like crazy. I picked up a job as a web developer at a large consulting company, about 2,000 employees, that ended up going belly up within 2 years of me joining. They made some really poor business decisions, like creating a venture capital arm within the company to invest in some of their clients, which, after making some bad bets, eventually led to their demise. Luckily, though, I jumped ship before the company folded, and I went over to Capgemini Ernst & Young. And then I bounced over to Duke Energy before I moved to Chicago, where I found myself at CNA Insurance. My career progression started as a web developer, progressed into senior roles, and quickly into management, where I really found my stride. I've always had a passion for development and building things, especially when I could lead a team towards a common goal. While at CNA, I got promoted to a role as an IT audit manager. This was completely out of my wheelhouse, but I accepted it as I got an opportunity to manage a large team and thought this would help my progression up the corporate ladder. I quickly realized that everything about this role went against everything I love. The role was about controlling IT systems rather than building them, and I quickly came to hate what I was doing.
What's the old saying? Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. It sounds like you really found that to be true.
I had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
And yeah, the lesson I learned was to focus on your passion. Don't sidetrack yourself with other hustles that aren't your core competency. But, luckily during this time, I started my fourth business with my wife and our best friends, Tim and Elle, called Express Drop. I was moonlighting, but it gave me the opportunity to pour my passion into being an entrepreneur and building something. We launched the first eBay drop-off store in Chicago. Amy and Elle were running the business full time, and Tim and I were there every day after work and on the weekends. We were all putting in 80-hour weeks on the reg, but we were building something, having a ton of fun, and it was worth all the time spent. I learned quickly that I like working with happy people that enjoy the work they've chosen. Today, I use this as a criteria when I screen people during interviews. If someone seems low energy and doesn't smile during an interview, I take that as a sign they don't enjoy what they do and aren't happy, and I don't hire them.
That's so true. You obviously need some skills to be successful in whatever industry or role you are operating within, but certainly have found that culture fit, maintaining a positive attitude, and just dedication and persistence to actually be successful and help not only advance yourself, but the company as well is incredibly crucial and go a long way.
Yeah, that's good insight. So back to Express Rep. We started with this single retail storefront in Roscoe Village in Chicago. People were walking into our store with a huge variety of antiques, collectibles, electronics, musical instruments, designer clothing, shoes, and more. We even sold cars, motorcycles, boats. I mean, you name it.
Wow, let
We
me
got,
just stop you real quick. I'm
yeah.
curious, what was the craziest item that anyone ever brought in to the store?
Oh wow, that's a good question. I, I'd say it was more about craziest items. We had one customer who would just wheel in pallets, and these pallets had these enormous boxes on them, a single box, and they were just filled with miscellaneous stuff. And
Okay.
it would take us days to go through it all, but we would get wheeled in, you know, 300 old cameras, or yeah, it was just like the most random things. I remember one day we went out to do a pickup at a third story walk up in Chicago. The guy wanted to sell all of his records, which now probably would be an awesome thing to sell because they're so rare and valuable. At
Yeah.
this time, they were garbage, and we were young and naive, and we didn't exactly know what was going to sell and what people had when we went to their house. So we went there and picked up seriously an entire like conversion van full of records. And Tim and I and Elle and Amy up and down 3 flights of steps for hours, moving all the records into the van, driving it back to the store, into the store, and then we go through the records one at a time, figure out if there's a value, and then post them on eBay. And it was a huge loss for us. So we just have
Oh,
story after story like that of, you know, a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of hard work, a lot of really random items. It was a tough business. You know, everything that we were selling was different. So you have to do the research,
I'm
take
sure that would have
photos.
been,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure that would have been fun if you still had that collection to go through today.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure there would be some gems in there. Um, but yeah, I can only imagine what people would bring in.
It was a cool business. Yeah, especially, you know, we were in the like antique area of Roscoe Village. There was antique shops around.
Yep.
So we got a lot of cool stuff. The business it got popular and quick. You know, there were other businesses like this on the West Coast at the time, but nothing in Chicago. So, you know, we found ourselves in a ton of earned media. We were on the front page of the business section in the Chicago Tribune, featured in Entrepreneur Magazine and the Daily Herald. Were interviewed on Fox and CBS News. And we were in a few books, like one called eBay Millionaires. Um, we were on the top of the world until we weren't. So we didn't know what the hell we were doing. None of us had ever reviewed a financial statement, and none of us reviewed one until it was too late. This was obviously our biggest mistake by far. We needed to have a close watch on our P&L and balance sheet, and none of us were really interested or cared about this minor detail. We were into sales and marketing and all the cool stuff we were selling and technology, but yeah, not the financials. So we did recognize a revenue dip after about 18 months, and we decided to pivot. We kept the retail flagship in Roscoe Village, but went all in with B2B. We started contacting high-end retailers, and we offered to liquidate their overstock. This drastically changed our trajectory. And we quickly learned that when you see the writing on the wall, pivoting is a good thing. Unfortunately, our pivot led to other issues. So we found ourselves with such an enormous inventory of clothing and shoes and accessories from these high-end retailers that we couldn't get it posted and sold quick enough. We didn't really think through our pivot, and we were not prepared in the least. We decided we needed to grow the business to be able to keep up with the inventory problem. So again, without reviewing a financial statement, we rented a warehouse in the West Loop and moved our operations there. We staffed up and off we went. The problem persisted. We couldn't hire fast enough, and we were sitting on merchandise for months. So we decided to pivot once again. We created a subsidiary of the company called Luxury Drop. Let's call this my fifth business. With this spinoff, we started hosting flash sales in person, selling the designer goods we had in stock at up to 90% off of retail. Again, this idea was a big hit, and we had people lined up around the block to get into our pop-up shop. But we once again came to the conclusion that we didn't have enough space for our express drop operations and our luxury drop flash sales. So again, without reviewing a single financial statement, we rented another warehouse in the West Loop. We ran the Chicagoland flash sales monthly, but realized that the crowds began to diminish as time went on. Our solution? Let's take the show on the road. We filled an 18-wheeler, no joke, filled it with our goods and took our pop-up shop across the Midwest. So all appeared to be going well. We were killing it in cities like Milwaukee, St. Louis, Minneapolis. The pop-up shops were working. And then the 2007-2008 financial crisis struck. Most of those high-end retailers bit the bullet. And so did our beloved Luxury Drop.
Yeah, I mean, building a stationary business is challenging enough. Expanding and growing and scaling takes a lot of forethought and planning. And I would expect that those concerns would only be compounded when you are approaching it with this pop-up flash sale model. What was that like? It had to be constant chaos.
Oh, it was chaos, and there was a lot of effort that needed to go into getting those pop-up shops ready. Like we had to do site visits and find space before we packed up the truck weeks or months ahead of time. We had to do local marketing, so we had to find all new marketing channels. At this time, we were putting ads in newspapers and finding churches and synagogues to advertise with and local associations. Like we were finding grassroots ways to get the word out. Then we needed to get tables to the location so we weren't bringing those with necessarily. Signage, you had to get that all set up. We needed people to work the sales. So we had to find local people and bring people with. And then we were a cash business, so we needed ATMs. So I had to have an ATM vendor that would bring ATMs to the location. It was,
wow.
We needed electricity. We needed Wi-Fi. Like, oh my God, there was so many details. And this was like beyond any of our expertise, but we just kind of, we winged it and figured it out, and it worked out until the financial crisis.
I can't imagine. I mean, even 15 years ago, finding information on each of those pieces you just mentioned was not nearly as easy as it is today. So I'm sure there was lots of trial and error with even finding the right neighborhood to set up shop in and finding the right spot.
Exactly.
Wow.
So looking back, we shouldn't have expanded our locations as quickly as we did. We could have figured out better uses of our current spaces, not entered into the additional leases and lessened the financial burden on us. So during the same period of time, we decided to start franchising Express Drop. We spent an arm and a leg and countless hours preparing our franchising agreement, and our operations manual, and finding our first franchisee. So he opened in Wilmette, a suburb of Chicago, in a highly trafficked strip mall by the highway. We were so excited to get our first franchisee that we didn't do that great of a job vetting the proprietor, who ended up slightly changing the name of the business, cutting us out of the mix, and continuing to run the business utilizing our branding, our process, and everything. So we sued this motherfucker and we won, but he declared bankruptcy and we never recovered a nickel. So with the trifecta of the financial crisis, the closing of Luxury Drop, and the battle scars from our lawsuit, we closed our doors a mere 5 years after opening. The hard lessons I learned included not being involved enough with the financial statements, expanding without a plan, and partnering with someone that we didn't fully vet.
You've really been through it all, Mike. I mean, this goes back to what you were saying earlier when you were hitting on how important it is to work with the right people and ensure A, that they're capable, but B, that they are good people who have your best interests in mind as well as the company. It's just so critically important to have that component.
You're right. That's one thing for the most part you can control during the interview process or during the honeymoon phase. You know, if you get a bad vibe, you know, listen to your gut and part ways. Do it sooner rather than later. Don't wait till it turns into a fiasco.
Yep.
So it's a good thing that Express Drop was my side hustle. You know, after 5 years at CNA, hating life for 3 of those years as an IT audit manager, I picked up a new gig at Thermo Fisher Scientific. I finally found myself in a role that was cut out for me. I took over a $20 million e-commerce channel for 2 of Thermo's distribution businesses, Cole Parmer and Davis Instruments, selling scientific equipment and industrial equipment. And after just 5 years in that role, I was able to grow those online businesses to $100 million. So this was my 4 touchdowns in a single game Al Bundy moment. And I might be dating you, Donovan, with that reference.
I was going to say that's someone I'm not fully familiar with, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
Okay. So I was able to drive this success with digital marketing strategies, including email, social, SEO, SEM, display, promotion, marketplace, remarketing, and so on. The whole gamut.
So you really, it sounds like you dipped your toes into the digital marketing space with Express Drop, but this is where you truly gained your digital marketing chops.
That's exactly right. So at this job, we built out a homegrown platform. There wasn't a ton of options for platforms at the time. So homegrown made the most sense. And our platform gave our international dealers their own e-commerce websites with custom pricing and localized currency, local language, and localized content. Additionally, we did a ton of e-procurement integrations that basically brought our catalog into the ERPs of our customers, enabling them to create purchase orders in their ERPs and populate them by punching out to our websites without having to sign in. Hopefully you guys understood some of that. I saw tremendous growth by electronically enabling our existing customers and bringing new customers into the fold by being present wherever potential customers hung out. After closing our doors at Express Drop and Luxury Drop, I started to get that entrepreneurial itch again. I was so busy with my day job at Thermo Fisher that I needed to get creative. I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and I was inspired. I then started my 6th business, Little Green Duckling.
Ooh, I'm curious about this one. What's behind the name? What's this business?
Well, it was a It was a business that sold natural, non-toxic, and organic baby products
Ah,
like
okay.
cribs and bottles and onesies and the like. And it was a completely automated e-commerce store built on the now defunct Amazon web store platform. I custom designed the website, and I had my own domain name that provided the appearance that you were shopping in my boutique baby product business. But in reality, Amazon was powering the catalog, handling fulfillment and customer service. I was basically an affiliate, and I received a commission on each purchase. I drove traffic via Google Shopping, and Amazon didn't make it easy for me to pull down a product feed that I could use for Google Shopping. So I had a Python script written that would crawl my own website and build a feed for Google Shopping. Someone's at my house. I hear the door ringing. Hopefully someone will get that. Anyway, this little automated business was the gem that continued to pay dividends until Amazon replatformed their web store product. With a family and my full-time gig, I just didn't have the bandwidth to rebuild, and I shut her down. Anyway, back to my day jobs. I spent the next 8 years at 2 electrical distributors, applying many of the same tactics that I implemented at Thermo, driving about $30 million of online revenue, some of that channel shifting offline customers to becoming online customers, and much of it by driving new leads into the fold. I especially moved the needle on the SEO front with hundreds of thousands of pages of unique product content. At this time and still to date, there aren't many distributors rewriting manufacturers' product content. But if you use the same content as the manufacturer and every other distributor, Google will treat you as if you don't exist. Which brings me to my latest endeavor. I completed what I was brought on to do at the second electrical distributor and found myself out of work. I started my job search and quickly realized that the positions I was looking for were few and far between. My real value add was starting and running large-scale e-commerce and digital marketing operations at billion-dollar distributors. Luckily, I quickly picked up a part-time gig at a billion-dollar wiring device manufacturer, Leviton. I continued to look for another part-time gig to fill my free time, and I ended up picking up one and then another and then another. After the second, I realized I was onto something. During my 13 years working for distributors, I was never approached a single time by a marketing company with a specialty in B2B. I honestly didn't know if any of these even existed, especially one focused on distributors. At all 3 distributors that I worked for, I hired third parties piecemeal to handle specific tasks and always had to take an active role in managing these firms, is because they rarely had any B2B experience. So I now had a light bulb moment. Continue to find part-time gigs and hire people to actually do the heavy lifting. Starting Main Event Digital was one of the best decisions that I ever made. Since inception, our team has grown to 25 people, both part-time and full-time, and we currently have 30 active customers. Our growth is attributable to our business model. For one, the entire team is 1099 contractors. We're currently in the process of converting some of our key folks to W-2, but having 1099 contractors keeps us very lean and gives us the ability to pay people when they are actually working and providing value. I would repeat this motto in a heartbeat, but keep in mind that you have to tread very lightly with how you treat 1099 contractors versus W-2 employees. We ask our contractors if they want to take on projects. We aren't able to set a strict schedule for them. They can work whenever they want and put in as much time as they choose. They have complete autonomy. We're completely remote. I was initially planning to get some office space and had some quotes for space around town in early March 2020. Well, this was a couple weeks before the country shut down due to COVID. So luckily I didn't sign anything. And the business went remote from the start. Another successful aspect of the business model is that we're all month to month. We're not asking our clients for a long-term commitment. This offering sets us apart from our competitors and makes the barrier for entry extremely low. This model also lights a fire under us to hustle and to drive an ROI in order to encourage our customers to stick with us month after month. We're also different from the competition due to our focus on B2B. About half of our customers are distributors, wholesalers, and manufacturers, which is our target, with the other half being service-oriented businesses. We're covering a pretty diverse assortment of industries, from electrical automation distributors to crafting adhesive manufacturers to metal recycling to debt collectors. We've quickly learned which of our digital marketing strategies is easily transferable from one industry to the next, like SEO. We also do a ton of experimentation, testing and measuring to try new marketing strategies for our customers. The key here is to try, succeed, or fail fast. Everything has to be measured in order to do that. Revenue attribution is at the core of our being as a company. We're a full service agency and offer our customers just about anything they would need to grow, from e-commerce strategy, graphic and web design, SEO, lead gen, digital advertising, marketplace management, video production, marketing automation, and more. Most of our competition has a limited service offering, and this helps to differentiate us. Finally, we're completely transparent with our pricing model. Our pricing is on the website, and we rarely come across competitors that are as transparent. In this industry, agencies will typically charge what they think they can get away with, rather than having a standard rack rate. With this model, we grew organically for 17 months via word of mouth without spending a single penny on marketing, other than maybe some t-shirts, which I'm wearing one right now, which is pretty ironic considering we're a marketing agency. We hit some stagnation at month 17, began to take our own medicine, and started running our own digital marketing plays. This has proven to be successful, and our growth continues. This brings us to today. If you've made it this far listening to my story, bravo. I'm shocked that I haven't put you to sleep by now. I hope that you've been able to pick up a few nuggets from my past that you can implement in your business right away. Make sure you follow our podcast on whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. And please share with your friends. Thanks for your attention, and stay tuned for more great content.